Okay, so transitioning to our next speaker. So I want to begin by presenting our MMRC Research Showcase, where we are featuring Dr. Anne Malott, one of our members of the Research Center, who will be presenting on Tackling Transition Together, the evaluation of a mentorship program for new registrant midwives. So Anne is a registered midwife, currently working at the Alongside Midwifery Unit in Markham, and she's also an associate professor in the Midwifery Education Program here at McMaster. She studied in the United States and in Canada with a Master's of Nursing and Midwifery from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland and a PhD in Health and Rehabilitation Sciences and Health Promotion from Western University in London. Her areas of research interest include interprofessional education, collaborative practice, transitioning to parenthood and mentorship. So welcome, Anne, and we will get your presentation up and visible for everybody, and we'll let you take it away.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Beth, for that lovely introduction. And I just want to say that I feel like this talk is going to transition, so to speak, quite nicely from what was just presented by Elizabeth and Esther. So hopefully it's almost like you planned it this way, right? Let me share.
Yeah, if you want to share your slides.
Okay, let's see if this flies the way I'm hoping. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, looks perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Due to technical challenges right now, I'm going to ask that my video actually be turned off, if that's okay. Terrific. Okay, fantastic. So again, nice transition from the previous talk. I just want to say that I am going to be talking a little bit about an evaluation of a mentorship program for new registrant midwives in Canada. And I am here today to represent our team, Beth Murray-Davis, who you know from the introduction and from this whole organization of the Symposium. And also Christine Sander is another member of the McMaster Midwifery Research Center. So we are all with that same affiliation. And we have no conflicts of interest. We have no funding. It's just a pilot project here that we're going to present today. But we did have ethical approval from the Hamilton Integrated Research Board. By way of background, studies have shown that transition to independent practice for new midwives is often difficult and overwhelming. And we just heard a little bit about that from Lisbeth. This is a time when clinicians have to develop that competence and confidence, and when they really are faced with the realities of autonomous practice, and there can be kind of a disconnect with what they had thought the profession would be like. And so they are having to meet those expectations of the profession. Making that transition requires a lot of support and mentorship. And in Canada, new midwives join established practices and generally have one midwife in that practice identified as their mentor. But the realities of what that really looks like can vary greatly. So little is known about what kind of support new registrants require and what practices would benefit from. And we really don't know what that support should look like and how to provide it. So the objective of this study was to assess the impact of a mentorship program for new midwives in Ontario, Canada, and their mentoring practices, with an aim to assess the extent to which a mentorship program assists transition through the first year of practice for new midwives and reduces the burden for practices. And this presentation in particular focuses on phase 1 data analysis involving new registrant midwives and their mentors in the first 4 months of the program. This is an explanatory, sequential, and mixed methods study using grounded theory methodology for data collection and analysis of the qualitative data. Our research questions and data collection tools were underpinned by Benner's stages of clinical competence, and social support theory was used as a framework to better understand the qualitative findings. So we had developed a program for new registrant midwives, and all 90 recently registered midwives in Ontario were eligible to participate, and the program began in July of 2022 and continues today. It's a one-year program that includes online resource materials, monthly peer case review meetings and support groups, and a web-based chat group. So 44 new registrants enrolled in the program, and all 44 were invited to participate in the evaluation. 10 new midwives and 5 of their mentors consented to participate in the evaluation, and 1 new registrant was lost to follow up. Data collection methods include structured online surveys using REDCap as a structured web-based platform for managing online data, as well as interviews and 1 focus group. And this was done over 2 phases. The first phase included 20 surveys, which gathered participant characteristics, as well as self-identified clinical competence and readiness for independent practice, pre and post exposure to online resource materials included in the program. There were also 11 interviews and 1 focus group with 9 new midwives and 5 mentors. Phase 2 will be completed with the follow-up interviews with new registrants as they finish up this first year of practice in June of 2023. So in terms of descriptive data, the new registrant participants were almost evenly split by age, with those in their 20s and 30s. They were mostly white European or white North American, with only 22 being people of color, which actually reflected the composition of graduates at that time pretty closely. There was almost an even split between those who were married or single and those with or without dependents. 78% had some experience with the practice, and 67% had been the senior students in that practice, learning the role of managing their caseload. Midwives in all but 1 group had oxytocin induction of labor in their practice, and the 1 group that did not was actively working to include it in their work, and all practices included epidural management as part of their work. 89% of the practices were either urban or mixed urban and rural, and the majority were large groups with 8 or more midwives to support that new registrant midwife. Thematic analysis was concurrent and iterative, and axial coding of phase 1 data revealed that there were 4 main themes identified here, and 14 categories, which were depicted here as well. There were 73 subcategories of data that didn't make the cut to this slide, sheer volume. And these 4 themes are peer support, building relationships, continuum of autonomy, and value of resources. So peer support as a theme referred to how the new registrants encouraged, validated, or inspired each other. It included all data that related to availability of support, providing a safe space to discuss difficult situations that were both clinical and social in nature, including advice on how to create work-life balance. Building relationships referred to how the new midwives relate to each other, but also feelings of belonging and wanting to please their mentors. Continuum of autonomy relates to refining clinical skills, increasing confidence and competence, and in decision-making, skill development. Value of resources includes all data related to didactic and human resources. And the following data will provide some examples supporting these 4 themes. So peer support was demonstrated within the monthly peer case review sessions, where attendees talked informally about how they were adjusting to independent practice and balancing their lives, as much as they shared about clinical practice issues. Having the ability to check in, so to speak, with others was valued by several participants. And this person says, throughout senior year, we were sharing at check-in and talking about how we felt. So we realized that we were all doing the same thing. And now it's been months since we've had that. And we lose sight of the fact that everyone is feeling the same way. I think, oh, sorry, I'll go to the next one. Group discussions were considered helpful in building capacity to cope with stress and navigate the demands of practice. And this participant says, I think it will help a lot of people prevent future burnout. And that was my goal for joining. Being able to share thoughts before presenting a clinical situation formally to their practice was reassuring to many participants. And this person says, there's a sense of validation, talking about experiences and management that you may not want to share in a formal practice peer review. Just being able to get feedback from people who are also at your stage of practice, and you feel like you have more people in your corner. Building relationships with midwives within the practices was an important concept to the new registrants. It came up through the data repeatedly. This was a clear need there was a clear need to be as independent as possible. And this first participant says, it's hard to be vulnerable to your practice mentors sometimes because you don't want to appear weak or that you can't be independent. In Canada, contracts are for 1 year and then initially, and then people are either retained as a general registrant or they move on to another group. And this means that, as this midwife says, the whole year is sort of like an interview. In order to be independent or less of a burden to their mentors, these new midwives access their peers as a first line for feedback and validation. This all contributed to feelings of confidence in their relationships with their mentors and a sense that they were on the right track. This participant says, I did run care plans by my group first, so I was more organized. I was able to work through them with more time in the group. And I think that reduced the strain on my mentor, or at least the amount of support I needed from her. Moving along the continuum from unsure and anxious toward capable and secure with work-life balance is obviously a different experience for every person. But several participants commented on how the program could help them consolidate decision-making skills and begin to develop confidence. This participant says, setting the foundation through this group might make all the difference for me. Consolidating my skills, learning to maintain work-life balance, and building that sense of community. For one participant, confidence was compromised by having to relocate after senior year and learn new systems, protocols, and processes. They described this setback this way. I feel like I left them, the skills that they had, in a bag back in the town where they were a student. They were there in that community and they were strong. I feel like they haven't gotten here yet. When the skills aren't so great, the confidence goes down. The confidence goes down and you don't feel strong. For one participant, as this last new midwife shares the benefits of familiarity of being in the same practice through senior year and into the first year and how that contributed to their transition expressed here. They say, now I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm a midwife. I feel like I don't need to sweat like crazy every time I get a page. So now I'm kind of feeling like I could keep on learning rather than just surviving. New midwives valued the online resources within the program as a means for supporting their transition, but felt they were too busy to engage with them once they started their new registrant year. This person says, I would have used on the online materials before I moved, and maybe that could have helped me settle in if I wasn't on call yet. I was just totally overwhelmed. Information on orientation and full scope practice were identified by several of the participants, just like they were in Elizabeth's work. And this person says, I just can't emphasize how important orientation is to me. It sets the stage for the year and years to come. Having resources to help with that is invaluable. Human resources were also valued. Having an experienced midwife as facilitator for the peer review sessions was considered helpful and is described by this person who says, it's good to provide experience sometimes because we're all lost sometimes, right? The blind leading the blind. The facilitator pushed us to move beyond chatting and catching up, which is also important, but it's good to do both. So these 4 themes and the corresponding categories were used to create a theoretical model that positions community of practice as central to the experience of transition through the first year. And these 4 themes of peer support, building relationships, continuum of autonomous practice, and value of resources were all core elements within the model. Opportunities for social connection and peer feedback enable new midwives to seek validation and support, which builds confidence in decision-making and care management and promotes independence. Resources contribute to this transition, particularly when provided before the demands of on-call work begin, and the support of experienced mentors outside the practice through facilitation of case review sessions was highly valued. So social support theory has been widely studied and has demonstrated that social support can enhance the ability to cope with stress and uncertainty, and therefore have a positive impact on health and well-being. Peer support is a form of social support, and it's provided by people who have a shared experience, like early career midwives. And the literature is clear that peer support fosters reassurance and a sense of belonging. The current research findings align with this notion and suggest that the new Registrant program assists graduate midwives by promoting confidence through non-judgmental peer feedback and safe space discussions on care management, facilitating reflective practice and transition to independence. Having a sense of professional belonging, enhanced confidence, and the ability to demonstrate reflective practice collectively can have an impact on clinical outcomes, job satisfaction, and ultimately sustainability of the profession. We just heard a bit about that from Elizabeth, and this study adds to the current understanding by demonstrating specifically how social support can be enacted through a community of practice for new registrant midwives, grounded in principles of psychological safety. And it also demonstrates what that should really look like. So in conclusion, midwives in Canada who are beginning their new registrant year value being part of a supportive mentorship program. Approaches need to be informal, social, and grounded in principles of psychological safety. And didactic resources should be shared before the beginning of the new registrant year. Next steps for our work include completing phase 2 data analysis to complete or to determine the differences in transition with increased exposure and experience throughout that year. We are going to revise and continue to offer the mentorship program based on the feedback received, and make online resources available to clerks within the Midwifery Education Program before they graduate so that they can use them to prepare for their new life on call. We're going to conduct a longitudinal study to determine impact over a longer period of time, and complete an in-depth analysis of internal versus external mentorship. So these are references. And I just want to thank all of the people who participated and shared their experiences so willingly, and thank the team for their involvement in this work. And I'm very happy to try to answer a couple of questions that might be in that Q&A or chat. So thank you all for your attention in the various time zones. I know it's not been easy for some of you, maybe quite late where you are, but it was certainly my pleasure to present this work to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. This was fantastic, and great to see the results from this study, and to think ahead to the next steps and future aspects of this project, which will be really exciting. If anybody has a question, you can put your hand up and we could give you some mic privileges for a moment, or you can type them in the Q&A box. And it's so interesting, and the emphasis came up, I think, in the last presentation as well, around peer support and how important that is for people in the transition. Do you want to talk a little bit more about kind of what shape that took in your project, or kind of, words of wisdom for the future? I see we have actually quite a few NRs or soon to be newly qualified midwives on the call today. So any tips for that peer support?
Honestly, I think the one piece that resonates with a lot, that I've heard resonates with a lot of new registrants, is the feelings of isolation. There's a huge shift from being a student where you meet regularly with your peers, where you're connected with your tutor, you just feel like you have someone around you all the time, and you have a preceptor who's available either in the room with you or on site. And that the option to always run plans by them and just have that social support with you all the time, maybe too much, is a lovely thing, though, when you realize how important it is when you don't have it, right? So that is a big piece, and that the isolation is a big piece in the transition. So I guess if you're asking for a little pearl, I would say, find ways to stay connected, find ways to, chat with one another with the web-based, WhatsApp chat group, meet with folks for coffee, come to the peer review support groups that we offer every bi-monthly. So those are fantastic ways to stay connected, run your plans by one another informally, and just, get that validation and reassurance, and trust yourself. Think out loud, trust yourself. That will help to build the confidence and really assist with that transition. It'll be really interesting to see, how folks are adjusting toward the end of the year. So bear in mind that these quotes came from folks at the 4-month period, right? The new registrants at the 4-month period. So it'll be quite interesting to see, the role of time and exposure, and how that impacts their experience toward the end of the year, and whether there are other things that we could incorporate into this program that would be really helpful to folks who would be using it.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're right. There's going to be some really interesting data now following up at this end of their first year of practice. I'm just looking now at the Q&A box. So again, some appreciation for great work and a great presentation. Claire asks, what role do you think education programs have in building support for the newly qualified midwife?
I think that's a really important comment that you make, Claire. And I'm going to just let everybody know that you're the president of the College of Midwives of Ontario. Do I have the right, Claire?
Yes.
Okay, so you and I are going to have some chats about what this could look like, from a regulatory perspective. Are there ways that we could encourage participation in a mentorship program attached to the requirements of the new registrant year in Canada? So that might be a way to really kind of encourage involvement. But just at this point in time, really encouraging folks who have just finished their clerkship to participate in the next cohort going forward. Word of mouth is always a great motivator. If folks have enjoyed being part of it, hopefully they'll pass along to the next group to participate in this group, because it's just an added benefit in that to that transition. So hopefully we just want to make sure people are healthy and well as we alluded to in the earlier presentation, importance of mental health and well-being of our students and our new registrants. So hopefully that helps.
It's great that you brought up the role of the college, because that was in a follow-up question actually from Claire as well. And then she also wondered about what role the association could play in supporting the newly qualified midwives.
So in Ontario, the Association of Midwives, Ontario Midwives, does a fantastic a lot of the resources that are included in this mentorship program actually were generously offered by the association to, to increase the utility of those materials that they worked so hard on. So I think there's a huge role that the association plays. And, obviously the relationship between the Midwifery Education Program and the association is strong. And we would really like to, support the use of those materials.
That's great. Thank you. Over on the Padlet, somebody mentioned that they think this is really great and that they really like seeing the work that's building resiliency in the profession from the beginning. And that also came up earlier in the week, the importance of that resilience and what we can do at an individual level and also a systems level to support that growth and formation, and the growth mindset came up and, things like that. So any comments about fostering resilience?
Yeah, like how much time do we have?
Another hour.
Another hour easily. I could talk all day. I am a huge proponent of, we all are, right, of promoting sustainability. We need our new registrants. We need the next generation of midwives, and we are all committed to supporting that transition and supporting sustainability. So that whether that's with different models of care, whether that's with the new registrant program, or whether that's just with frankly kindness and support in general toward all of our colleagues who really want to encourage a positive experience and transition to practice. So I'm really thrilled. Let me just say I'm really thrilled with the focus of this symposium, around sustainability, and I think it's really important work. So thank you for coordinating all of it.
Oh, our pleasure. We just like to talk about the things that we find interesting, which is fun to do together. We have another question. So we haven't touched on it too much in your talk because it's been focused on Ontario newly qualified midwives. And the funding model in Ontario is related to caseload funding, where it's kind of a bundle of funds per client that the person is caring for. But in other provinces, we know that the funding model looks a little bit different. And I know that this may not have been the focus of your research, but do you know of any research, or do you want to speculate on how models of funding might affect the way that midwives are supported in that first year of practice, and maybe might also affect mentorship?
Well, I can speak about what I know, and that is what Liz Darling referred to, and that's that new practices that support new registrants in Ontario do receive a caseload variable. They do receive a little bit of money to mentor those folks. So there is a little bit of an incentive there, and there's an opportunity for new registrants to say, in Ontario, thank you very much. I've joined the practice. You are getting a little bit of funding for me, so please do mentor me effectively, right? So I think that's a maybe something that's unique to Ontario. Challenges, if there isn't a remuneration factor there, or the capacity for remuneration, it may pose other challenges if people aren't intrinsically motivated to support that next generation. I think they should clearly, because ultimately, if the practice doesn't grow or people turn over quickly, it's highly problematic. It's just a lot of turmoil. And so there should be, in my opinion, ask for sort of my opinion, a vested interest in supporting that transition to retain folks, right? And to really build that confidence, totally aside from, quality assurance and good clinical outcomes, right? You all share liability, you all want, fantastic clinical outcomes for your folks in care. And I think if you're really being clear as a practice that that's your philosophy right from the get-go, as you hire new registrant midwives, if everybody's on the same page, that makes for a great fit. So hopefully there's that intrinsic motivation to support the new people coming on board.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, I think a lot has been raised this week about this issue. And I think it's a topic where, again, we could dive in from a more international perspective again in the future, maybe with another panel discussion around, how mentorship looks across the globe for midwives and what some of those transitional issues are. So hopefully we can keep this dialogue going in other ways. But I want to thank you, Anne, for joining us today. There are still a few comments in the Q&A, so maybe you'll have a chance to type some answers to those folks that we didn't get to hear from today. And I'm going to move us forward to our last speaker. Don't forget to fill out the poll that is up to give some feedback on the presentation from Anne. And yes, and there's even somebody who's excited about participating in the program this year. So definitely head on over to that QA box.